So I'm up early about to get my workout on. But I saw this interesting article in the Independent talking about women. Basically one of these articles, again, complaining about the young men, talking about economically attractive young men, not enough available economically attractive young men for marriage. And this is another one of those hit jobs going after the young men for not leveling up to be with today's modern women. Not that young men should not become the best version of themselves. Where you lose me is when you add today's modern women into the equation. And here's the problem with this whole thing, this whole shaming campaign, is that it's completely focused on the men and what the men are not doing, what the young men are not doing. There are some young men that have some issues that need some help. We've spent the last 70 years plus destroying manhood and masculinity. And some of these young men were not even raised in an environment with strong fathers. But the disturbing part about this is that, and I've seen some content creators, especially Andrew Wilson, what part of the social contract are young women are responsible for? Do they have any accountability? And what is the average young man getting today in terms of what a wife is? Do these young women qualify? Are they worthy of being wives? Nobody asks that question. Because what happens is it is such a focus now on these young men and shaming men. And and I understand there's a, decline in the birth rate, and there's an economic motivation in terms of, getting men to marry women. Because, who's going to pay for all these women when they get old? Certainly a lot of them are not going to be managing their money, and none of them are riddled with debt. But the question is this, and I always say this, the best way to get what you want is actually to deserve what you want. And are these women worthy of marriage? Are they of the qualities of their grandmothers? See, what they don't see, people like Scott Galloway and all of these other men, all these people don't put into the equation is the factors of things like sexual liberation. And by the time these young women who've been raised to focus on their career, focus on their jobs, focus on themselves, they're not raised to take care of kids and family and be wives, and they've enjoyed sexual liberation thoroughly. I'm talking about vigorous and vicious pounding. So by the time that young woman gets into college, she's 18 years old, she pledged fraternity, she's getting ran through. Not all women, but a large majority of them are getting ran through. And I always use this theory, what I call the recycled mouthwash theory, which is that you think about it from this perspective. Imagine if if everybody else was standing around and there was a bottle of mouthwash. Imagine if I used the mouthwash, I spit it back in the bottle. Another guy uses that same mouthwash, spit it back in the bottle. Another guy uses that same mouthwash and spit it back in the bottle. And then you hand that mouthwash to some well-established, hard-working, honorable man and says, hey, here, it's your turn. Not only do you have to use this recycled mouthwash, this is the only mouthwash you get to use for the rest of your life. And you have to put all your resources into this mouthwash. And I'm not trying to really compare a woman or anything else to mouthwash, but you're asking men to commit to recycled mouthwash. Is what exactly is going on here on the sexual marketplace and on the dating and relationship marketplace. And then you ask yourself, why are these young men underperforming in many instances? Not that we haven't systematically destroyed them, through the system, but the reward that they get at the end of the rainbow is the equivalent of us as men going to the store and purchasing recycled mouthwash. And I want that to sit in for you ladies to think about. You're asking men to level up. See, this is the problem we have out here today. And that's why you need guys like me in this space. You need guys like me who is hard to shame, because I don't have any of the deficiencies that they usually shame men for. But the reality is this, is you're basically asking men to level up to acquire the women that would only equate in terms of if you think about sexual liberation, you think about what these women are doing when they're young, the value of what they offer between their legs would be the equivalent of a homeless man. I would say a homeless man is overqualified to marry many of today's modern women. Some of these women are coming to the table with 30 bodies. They've had STDs in the past. They've had relationships, failed relationship. You're asking men to level up for used mouthwash. It's not going to work. These young men are not going to respond to that. We have to get to the point where we challenge these young men to do things. Like if I took a bunch of grown young men and say, let's go put an engine in a car. Let's go do a project. Let's build something. Let's build a robot. You're challenging them on a level without adding the women. Keep the women to the side. We can get them out the basement by challenging them to do masculine, manly things. But as soon as you add today's modern women, you make my job harder, because you're going to end up with all you're going to do is, it's harder for me to get the young men inspired. You're going to end up with a bunch of broke, lazy bums. Don't add the women to the equation. They're not going to be motivated for used mouthwash. And that's the fundamental problem and the logic. I understand there's a primal drive to mate. Men have a biological need to procreate. These young men are full of testosterone. They're horny. So yeah, they will drink that. They will consume that mouthwash, used mouthwash, because of their primal drive. But after they get post-nut clarity and that testosterone level go down and they start thinking clearly and they start evaluating the fact that, this woman has slept with 30 people, any young man with self-esteem is going to haul ass down the road. He's not going to sign up for that deal. Why would he do it? Unless he's just, and then these women are only going for these 20% of men. There's 20% of men that have options. They're not going to take that. And some of these other guys, even some of these simps are starting to get wise. And they're like, yo, hold on here. None of these dudes in the past required marriage. So you gave your box to all these men. And they didn't have to pay the price of marriage. Marriage is MSRP. And now you want to charge me full price? Kick rocks. The problem is they're not addressing the issue, which is hot status does not equate to quality. A woman that's a lawyer or a professional doesn't mean that she's a quality woman. You're still getting a ran through woman, a lot of trauma, a lot of damage, one that is highly feminist, sexually liberated, and don't really care for men. You see, they don't care for men. They care about the resources that men bring. They care about having leverage. Leverage is what they value. Even for me, as an older guy, I'm 51 years old. Yeah, I work out, I'm in shape. But what I'm saying to you is that even for the women in my category, they only care about men for a retirement plan. You think about how many years they've had in a gynocentric environment to secure a good man for a relationship? No. They're looking for leverage. Leverage is that they can get into a marriage or relationship and you can't get rid of them. They want, so they can rest in that, not in their femininity. They can rest in their mediocrity. That's what they want. That's why they want. And then if you complain or have a problem with it and you try to get out of it, they can get your resources. That's what these older women want. They want to be able to rest in their mediocrity, offer you poor sex, bad attitude, and start gaining weight. So there's no, that's what they really want. They want security to rest in their mediocrity and to get the resource and sponsorship. They have no desire to submit to a man or follow his leadership. So at the end of the day, we're dealing with a leftover market. And young men, I'm trying to encourage them. This is a male self-esteem problem that we have in this country. If guys really think about that theory of used mouthwash, most of these dudes be like, yo, I get it. We have a lot of simps and dudes that just be horny. But if you really think about it for a second, some dude has literally pounded, dude like me, big 6'7" dude like me, has probably pounded your broad into submission. And that's who you want to marry. Congratulations. Who signed up for that deal? And that's the problem. See, for marriage, women, it used to be a time when the price of sex used to be marriage. And you know, a father will hand over his kept daughter, and they were doing arranged marriage or whatever else. But now with sexual liberation, everybody's pounding out here, getting pounded out here. Really? You think that woman's going to be happy at home with just a regular dude? When dudes like me have ran through them, they're not going to be happy. I'm not saying I ran through these women. Look, I take the fifth from any of this shit. Anyhow, what I'm saying, you think they're going to be happy? They ain't going to be happy. No. They get the security, and then they're on social media with all these distractions, looking the internet for men, the men that they want. And they're going to end up with these divorces and these gray divorces and all this other crap, because that's not who they want. And that's what happens when you have women that have been ramrodded and ran through, which has been supported, heavily supported by feminism in this gynocentric environment. So enough with these wordless, stupid articles of what young men need to be, and start asking yourself the question, and start saying to yourself, what are these young men getting in return for being these great men? I think that men should be great men. But let's take away this reward at the end of the rainbow as being women. Your personal achievement in the world of men is more of a reward. Your competence, your craftsmanship, your drive, your motivation, your competitiveness, that's more of a reward. The achievement of seeing a great structure that you created, a great piece of art, a great piece of science, now that's an achievement within itself. Even when I do a car repair and I see the product working, that's an achievement. But women in box, not today, buddy. Those days are gone. Peace and blessings to you guys. Make sure you hit the like button.